أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everybody, I hope you're well. May Allah bless you all. Welcome back to our monthly Lighthouse live session. So what we do in these is basically what we do in our private sessions but publicly. So for those of you who don't know, Sapiens Institute has a number of things, a number of projects going, and among them is the Lighthouse mentoring. So if you go to our website, one moment, I'll just up the top. So if you go to our website, as you can see here, at the top you have a section called Lighthouse Mentoring. If you click that, you can book a one-to-one meeting with one of our mentors. Now I need to make something very clear and very specific, because many people book meetings still, despite me saying this repeatedly and despite the information being here. But it's not a fatwa service. So if you've got random fiqh questions, it's not the function of this project at all. The project is specifically to help people, for example, Muslims who are doubting the religion of Islam. So they are unsure about whether or not Islam is true and fear that the fundamentals are somehow undermined. Ex-Muslims, that people that have left Islam, that are on a journey possibly back to Islam and want to discuss certain doubts that they have, so that they can overcome them. Non-Muslims, so there's people who have never been Muslim but maybe are interested in Islam, but again have certain doubts that they wish to discuss. And we also deal with another category, which is the da'i, or the leader within the Muslim community, people who are engaged in roles where they have to deal with these categories, the Muslim, the ex-Muslim, the non-Muslim, and they need to equip themselves on how to address certain contemporary issues or questions that might pop up that they may not be too familiar with, or really understand the best way of answering. Very sorry, I completely forgot I've got my fan on full blast. As any of you from the UK may know, we are currently going through some extremely hot weather, which is very surprising considering it is now September. But alhamdulillah. And when I woke up this morning, I found my car covered in sand, which has apparently come from the Sahara Desert. Alhamdulillah. So, and the whole of the northwest, or maybe even the whole of the UK, is just covered in Saharan dust at the moment. So yeah, it's quite hot. So I've got my old. This is a childhood fan of mine, by the way. This I've had this since I was a kid. It's still going strong. It does me well at keeping me cool. But yeah, so we're here to engage with people, to help them to overcome their doubts, or to engage with people who are helping people to overcome their doubts in the religion of Islam. And again, just to re-emphasize, that does not mean asking random fit questions. Like, I've had people book meetings for marriage advice, for asking, whether it's halal or haram to do this or that, and it's just not the place for it. You'd need to, I would advise, go and speak to qualified muftis who are qualified to give a fatwa. But this is, again, mostly based on just helping people to overcome their doubts or their worries or their fears about whether or not Islam is true. And it's completely free. So you can book a meeting via the website. You go here, you select the service, either addressing doubts, so that someone who is suffering from doubts would pick this one, or someone that is in a leadership, activist, or mentoring capacity, i.e. a da'i, for example, or an imam, or someone that's maybe got a friend who's a non-Muslim that they're giving da'wah to, these kind of things. You would book here, and we can help give you some leadership mentoring. And then once you've booked it, you can start to put in all of your details via the website. For those of you who do not know, we have recently expanded into Spanish. So the exact same service provided here, also in Spanish as well. And it's something that, inshallah, either you or people you know may benefit from. It is completely free. If you do book a meeting, you are sent an email with a Zoom link that will basically give you access to the meeting at the time that you've picked. And then you will get access to our mentor, and you can have a private one-to-one discussion with them. The service as well is available to people who are over the age of 18. There's another problem we have. Apparently, a lot of under 18s are not reading the application when they're signing it, but we do make you click a box that confirms you are over the age of 18. And the terms and conditions say that you have to be at least 18 years of age for legal reasons to use the service. Unfortunately, we can't deal with anyone that's under that age. But if you, for example, if you're worried about your brother or your sister or your son or your daughter, and they are under the age of 18, and you were hoping that they could take the service, we can equip you. So if you were to book the meeting, and we can talk to you about whatever questions they've been asking you and help you to help them, which is an alternative. And then the other way is you just wait until they turn 18 and book a meeting for them then. Or you make use of our learning platform, which has got a lot of content specifically trying to help people with their doubts, which is, for example, if you go right to the bottom here, we've got a free course called the No Doubt course. And this is specifically aimed at helping you to deal with your doubts or the doubts of other people with 10 strategies. It's a course produced by Sheikh Fahad Taslim and Ustad Hamza Zorsas. So it's one I highly recommend. You can see here we've got a lot of people already enrolled in that. You can see the curriculum. It goes over many different subjects. It's professionally filmed, academically sourced. It's a great course with a lot of information in there. You've got quizzes periodically throughout it that you can take to sort of test whether or not you're absorbing the material. And if you do complete it at the end, you will receive a certificate. So that's an alternative as well. But yeah, so please do feel free to engage with all of the content, not just the Lighthouse Mentoring or the Learning Platform, but we also have audiobooks being made available, including my recent published book, Islam and Nihilism, My Poison, My Cure. We also have books, essays, all of that available completely for free. So do check out the website, engage with it, and make use of that. But yeah, so today, what we are going to be doing is a live mentoring service. So if any of you are suffering from any doubts, please do feel free to post them in the chat and we will try to address them, inshallah, if I am able. If not, or if the conversation ends up being too big for a Lighthouse live session, because these generally only go on for about an hour and a half. And then I will advise you to book a private meeting via the Sapiens Institute website. You can also just type in this here, which I shall post in the chat as well. And when you go to this link, you can book a meeting. If you want to use it, the Spanish version, you just have to go to sapiensinstitute.org, go to Espanol. I'll just show you. So you go to sapiensinstitute.org, and then at the top here, you can see Espanol. You click there, and then you click at Lighthouse. And you can go through that portal there to book it in Spanish. So yeah, so I'm going to engage with the chat for the time being. And then, inshallah, if anyone starts to ask any questions, we'll begin to engage with them. Hopefully, I'm going to have some people join us, inshallah. But not heard back from anyone yet, so it may just be me today, brothers and sisters. So we've got a comment here by Jamshid, who says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for your brilliant efforts and passion. We are going to translate this book into Uzbek and write officially to copyright. God willing, inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm guessing maybe you mean my book. If that's the case, just make sure you contact info@sapiensinstitute.org just to discuss that with them and get it signed off, inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah to absolutely everyone who's giving their salams. May Allah bless you all. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're all well. Let's have a look. How to join. So you can ask your questions in the chat for the time being. I'm just going to sort of engage with the chat for the moment. And then if for whatever reason there's nothing really too interesting popping up here, I may just pop the link on. And maybe we can get some of you to join us. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you do book a mentoring. Yes, it's another thing. MashaAllah, Brother Tariq is another one of our mentors. And he, like myself, has had to go through this issue a number of times, where someone is booking a meeting and then they don't bother to turn up. We do send you emails to tell you exactly when that is or when the appointment is. We send you Google Calendar invites, which you're supposed to accept, and then they send you calendar reminders as well. And still, despite all of this, some people don't attend and do not communicate with us to say that they cannot attend. They do agree when they're booking the meeting to give us at least 24 hours notice if they are unable to attend, and some people still do not. There's many of the brothers are 100% volunteering, and they're giving their time and they put effort into studying the questions that you've asked prior to the meeting and putting effort into preparing for the meeting. And all of that, unfortunately, just obviously it doesn't go to waste in a sense. They still get the reward for it. But this is terrible etiquette, and it does waste the session, which could have gone to someone else who was in need. So if you do book, do that only if you intend to turn up to the meeting. And if for whatever reason you cannot turn up to the meeting, please just let us know. Just let us know and cancel in advance so that we don't have to worry about that. Also, I believe, yes, this isn't a counseling service. It's another important issue. There's some people, they're suffering from mental health problems. They're suffering from severe anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, these kind of things. We are not counselors. We do not have psychological training. And so we cannot act in the capacity of a counselor. And we would recommend that if you are suffering from these kind of things, that you get in touch with your local medical professional and seek advice from them with regards to a proper course of action as recommended by someone who is qualified to deal with such things. We only act in the capacity of mentors. That is, we are dealing with questions about the religion of Islam, specifically to do with doubts about whether or not you believe Islam is true or not, that kind of thing. Are the audiobooks AI generated? No, I believe that we actually paid a guy in America to read them. If you listen to mine, you will not hear my voice. You will hear an American dude. Inshallah, he did a good job. So, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. About the contingency argument, yeah, I guess you can do. I'll just post the link in the chat. Also, brothers and sisters, I'm going to post the link here, but preface, you may not be guaranteed a space on the live stream. We've got limited time. So that's number one. So don't think just because you've come into the back and that you've waited 5, 10, 15 minutes, that guarantees that you will come on. We've got limited time here. It's first come, first served basis, based on the fact that you're asking relevant questions that I'm capable of dealing with. And that's it. Like, I can't promise that you're going to be on. Please do not complain if you don't come on. And if it's not specifically to do with a doubt or dawah or something like that, that you currently have, then yeah, like, don't think that you're going to come on just to talk about something random. So there is the live chat. While we're waiting for Faith to jump on, we'll go through and let's see what other questions. How does our view hold any more explanatory power over the atheist view? The atheist view says we don't know the explanation. Our view says a necessary being doesn't need an explanation. Well, it depends which, like, the way that this is argued. The atheist says we don't know the explanation. So it depends on the atheist as well. Like, you'll find there are atheists that do say that there has to be a necessary being. They just don't want to concede that that would be something that would refer to as a god. So the atheists are not like, they're not cohesive with this view, or they don't have a monopoly, or that view doesn't have a monopoly within the atheistic community. And obviously with regards to the contingency argument, it just argues for this notion that there must be some kind of necessary being. In terms of how it offers more explanatory power, yeah, I'm not too sure like what you want as an answer from that. I can say that I find it to be more compelling that there is a necessary being. I guess you'd need to expand on what you mean by like what do you want to know about in terms of the explanatory power. So howdy. How do we reply to this objection? Okay, please do. So there's a couple of you that have joined that I don't recognize from the chat. So if you could just write down in the private chat what it is, what your questions are, or what you would like to discuss. I'll review them, and then when I'm about to bring you on, I'll ask you to just turn your camera on momentarily and give the camera a little bit of a wave. I'm just going to keep reading the comment section until you type what it is you wish to discuss in the private chat in the back. Yeah, this is really important. So many of the doubtful questions are rooted in a lack of understanding of the fundamentals of Islam. Too much time spent listening, watching, reading non-Muslim sources. Yeah, so I think I agree that there's a lot of the time, especially with the mentoring sessions that I do privately, where I'm speaking to someone and it's just based off of like a misunderstanding of the Islamic position. So they have this assumption that this is the case or that is the case, and then when you look into it, it turns out that most of the time that's not at all how Islam operates. Yeah, it's quite funny. Bro Yusuf, have you heard about any thoughts? So I have come across his army of robots on Twitter when I used to be on Twitter. I just think it's a load of nonsense, if I'm quite honest. Still trying to get in touch with you, not for Shubuhat. What are you trying to get in touch with me for then? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we've got Samadi responding to the comment saying, in the atheist case, the view is one of ignorance. In our case, the answer is an actual answer, i.e. there is an end to the chain. It's a, mashallah, good take on it. Did he take his shahada? Did who take his shahada? There is a difference between saying, I don't know, maybe the lake has a bottom, and saying the lake has a bottom. Yeah, exactly. And not just that. So it depends on the atheist, like I was saying. They do fracture or split up into different crowds with different positions. Like, is it an agnostic atheist? Is it someone who's claiming there is no God? Is it some like, are they saying that they don't know, but it might be possible to know? They just haven't done enough research. Are they saying that it's impossible to know? And so that, you know, that I've got this hard agnostic, where their position is the only possible one. And both the hard atheist and the theist are incorrect in saying that there's something that you can know or not know, or that is true or false. Okay, so you don't have to keep your camera on. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Tukba? You can turn it off, but you do need to turn it on momentarily, just so that I can see that you're not a bot. Okay, yeah, can you just give us a little thumbs up? Thumb. I need a thumb. If you're not, there we go. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, you can turn your camera off again. Okay, so I'm just going to bring Tukba on. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So what's your question, sorry?
Yes. So, yeah, so alhamdulillah. So my question, brother, is in regards to the contingency argument. How do we reply to someone who says that the universe is necessary because the energy and matter in it is preserved based on second law of thermodynamic and the law of preservation of the matter?
Yeah, so in terms of the matter side of it, so I would say the matter isn't necessary because it has a beginning. Like if you go to the CERN website, on the beginning of the universe.
Because what they say, these people who argue this, what they say is like, they say like, because I have read through the articles that they use, they say like the matter is actually just changing its form. It's becoming energy. So we actually never lose it. It's never disappeared.
So there's two parts of it. So the firstly, like, what's the difference between matter and energy? Yeah. Matter is something that's made of particles. So like if we're looking here, in the first moments after the Big Bang, the universe was extremely hot and dense. As the universe cooled, conditions became just right. So this is the important bit. Became just right to give rise to the building blocks of matter, the quarks and electrons of which we are all made. So the building blocks of matter. So matter itself is contingent on other things, and the building blocks that make matter themselves are contingent upon a particular set of things, i.e., the extremely hot and dense universe that expanded and cooled down in order to give rise to certain conditions so that they could begin to exist. So this notion of energy is the main contention that we've got to sort of deal with. Matter is not something that can be considered necessary, because it is something that begins to exist and has prior conditions that are necessary.
What if they say, like, all the attributes that we give to the necessary being, the one that has caused the beginning of the universe, they attribute that to the universe itself, and they say that it has always been there, its energy is preserved, it's just changing forms and so on.
So we can deal with that. So in terms of
they have shared some articles that subscribe to this idea, and they you understand, they articulate their position based on that, and so that's how I couldn't know how to reply to it, to be honest.
Okay, so in terms of, we're going to ask what is energy. Yeah. So if we ask what energy is, generally the way they define it is it's almost equivalent to an attribute. So if you define energy, so energy is typically understood as the capacity for work or vigorous activity, exertion of vigor of power, a non-physical force or quality perceived as inhering in a particular place, person, or situation, usable heat or power, a source. So it's an attribute that subsists in things. Yeah, so energy is in itself not a being, not a thing. Things have energy. Yeah, and it's synonymous with power or strength. So if they're trying to reduce everything to power, we've got to ask the question, well, what does that power subsist in? Now, if they're, with regards to why we say the universe isn't the necessary thing, is because we say, where does necessity come from? If you have a pile of contingent things, how does this extra quality appear? The quality of necessity. If everything in it is contingent. So, for example, if you have a pile of 5 things, everything in it is contingent. How does that pile of 5 things ever become necessary? If each of them is dependent upon something, there's no necessity in any of it. So why would just collecting it all together give rise to necessity? Yeah, the universe is a collection of contingent things, and the argument goes that therefore it's where the whole thing would be contingent. And the objection they make here is they say this is a fallacy of composition, and the objection we make to that objection is that no, it's not. The fallacy of composition is dependent upon the type of quality. So certain things can be a fallacy of composition. For example, if you say this brick is small, therefore, if I make a wall out of lots of small bricks, that the whole wall must be small. Or if you say everything that makes up the universe is small, it's made up of atoms. Atoms are small. The universe is made up of atoms. Therefore, the universe is small. That would be a fallacy of composition.
When do we decide whether we can attribute that fallacy or not?
So as far as I can sort of make out of it is that it's the quality itself. If it's not relative, then it's something that would not be considered. Like, for example, if something is made of stone, This isn't relative. Something is or it is not made of stone. It's not dependent upon your perspective or the person. It either is or it isn't. And if you say the wall is made up of bricks, each and every one of the bricks is made up of stone. Therefore, the entire wall is made up of stone.
How do we apply this to the universe example, brother, if you don't mind?
Yes, I'm gonna get to that. But so the quality there is something that can be inferred from the part to the whole. Now, I would say contingency is a similar type of attribute. That contingency isn't a relative quality. It doesn't matter if you're like this person or that person. If something is contingent, it's always contingent. So it's not relative. Unlike the quality of small or big, it's relative. Like if you have, you could have a dog and you could have an elephant, and they could be the same size, or a rat and an elephant, and they could be the same size, but you might describe the rat as being big and the elephant as being small. So the quality is itself something dependent upon context and could be understood to be relative. Do you understand? So when it comes to contingency, contingency isn't the same type of attribute as, for example, big or small, or light or heavy.
So we say like that the universe. Sorry, just so you correct me if I'm wrong, please. So we say that the universe is made up of contingent things. They are contingent because they are caused. Right within the universe, we see, for example, a person causes the tree, for example, by placing the seed in the ground and farming and whatever. And therefore, the tree is contingent, is dependent on the person. The person is dependent on their parents. Is this how is this what you mean by everything in the universe is contingent? And therefore,
contingent is a broad term, can mean many things. One meaning is that these things are caused. Another could be that it is dependent upon other things for its existence. Another could be that it is a possible existence, so that its non-existence is possible, as well as its existence. So it can begin to exist, it can cease to exist. Its existence can be turned on and off like a light switch. So these are different ways of understanding what contingency means. And then you can make different lines of argumentation from each of them qualities. So you can make an argument from independence or from dependency, for example, to the notion of an independent being that's separate from the collection of all dependent beings.
You could make an argument, please, about this point.
Which one, sorry?
Just this example of dependency.
Yeah, so the argument would be going that you have a collection of dependent things, and we'll just say anything that has the quality of dependence, we will put into the set. And the set is just the set of all things with this attribute, dependence. If it is dependent upon something else for its existence, it goes into the set. We add it to the pile.
Okay.
And the argument says is that all there is? Is it just dependent things? Because we look around and I only see dependent things. Is there anything else? And so then you say, well,
to explain all that set of dependent things, right?
Yeah, so that's the final sort of conclusion that argument will come to. But there's many steps to it. So first, you wouldn't necessarily posit the necessary being to begin with. You would just say, is it possible that it could only be dependent things? And then you look at all of the ways that could sort of play out. So, for example, I'll pull up a little paint thing. I do love my paint, so bear with me.
Yeah, I like it that way too. I like to draw, and while
I'm a visual teacher and visual learner. But yeah, so so if you just say there is like 1, 2, all of these circles are dependent things, and you say, okay, what's this? Is this dependent? Yeah, it's dependent. We'll add it to the pile, and you're going through all things in existence, and you say if they have this quality of dependence, we're going to put them in this box or in this set, and we'll call this set of all dependent things. Sorry for my handwriting. I'm using a mouse. Of all dependent things. So if something is dependent, we throw it in the box. We look at this. We go, is this dependent? Yeah, we throw it in the box. Now the quantity, we would argue, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if this is a box of 10 things, of a million, of a trillion, or an infinite number. This could go on ad infinitum. And we say that
Okay.
regardless of the number, the set would still require an explanation outside of itself. That it would still need some sort of explanation for its existence. That if all of these things are dependent and you just pile them up together, you have a pile of dependent things, and the pile is itself dependent upon something. And then the argument is as well, okay, so maybe I could shrink this. That might be a clever way of doing it. Proper paint is much better. Bear with me. Let me see if I can just wait. I've got a PC. Why am I going on like there's not a Gleaming Paint app already on here? We're going to be much cleverer. I keep forgetting that I could just get Paint.
Oh, okay.
Rather than using the browser. Okay. So, yeah. So this is the set of all dependent things. Yeah, you've just got a pile of things. Now, what the question is okay. So the set itself as a whole, do we refer to it as dependent or independent? Now we can't. If the set as a whole is dependent, then it has to be dependent on something outside of it.
If they say it's independent.
If they say it's independent, yeah.
Yes.
So if it is independent, then you have to say, well, where does the dependency come from? So what kind of independence is this? Is this because you have like a circular dependency? So you have like thing A, B, and C, and they all sort of like depend upon each other, and so then you don't have to make recourse to something outside of the set. Yeah. So like this is one way of trying to deal with it. You could say that, oh well, there's an infinite number. This is dependent on this, and this is dependent on this, and this is dependent upon this, so on and so forth ad infinitum. And so therefore you don't need to make reference to any independent being, and that makes the set independent as a whole. And the other one is that like you just have this sort of finite line that goes into the past, and then it just sort of stops, and then this thing here is also dependent, but it just sort of begin to exist. So you got these three options. Now these are problematic because this one leads to a contradiction. So for example, in order for A to begin to exist, it sort of presupposes that it already has to exist to give rise to its causes. Yeah, so in order for A to exist, it has to have B in existence and C in existence to give rise to it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of, the grandfather paradox. It's like, this is me. And it's like, in order for Yusuf to be born, he has to give birth to his grandfather, who will give birth to his father, who will then later give birth to him. Yeah. That can't be the case, because what this presupposes is that I both exist and do not exist. So I have to exist before I exist in order to exist. Yeah, so which is
this replies to the confusion I got when they start speaking about energy and preservation of energy and first law of thermodynamics, because regardless of all those kind of laws, if we go with this kind of logic of that circular causality, so I think that wouldn't be possible. Wouldn't be possible.
So the way they sort of explain it is not quite this. It's more this one. So what they're sort of saying is that like if you're looking at it head up from the top, it looks circular, but they probably are positing some sort of spiral where you have this thing So you have energy turns into matter, which turns into energy, which turns into matter, which turns into energy. But this here is not the same as that one.
Yeah, that's a linear kind of.
Yeah, it's a linear line that goes on ad infinitum, basically, is what they're trying to suggest.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so this is, I would say, separate from that, although it can look like that's what they're saying. I would say that's not quite what they're saying. I think if we number this one as number 1, this one is number 2, and this one is number 3. I would say that they're probably just trying to suggest number 3. How do you get it so that it just deletes the line? This isn't as easy as I remember it used to be. Can I increase the size of it? Okay. So yeah, so in terms of this one, I'd say this one leads to absurdities because you have to posit that thing A has attribute X and it has attribute not X. And one thing cannot have an attribute and the negation of that attribute. Yes. Because if X is true, then that necessitates that not X is false. And so you can't say that X and not X exist simultaneously in a thing, because that is to say that X is true and not X is true. But not X is the negation of X. You follow?
Yes. So we've got these 3 examples, and obviously this first one is the circular one is impossible.
Yeah.
And then, so then how about number 3?
Yeah, so we'll get to that one. We'll just go through them one at a time because number 3 is the major one. Okay. I'm just showing you why these 2 just get knocked out, and then the only other one that we've got left is this one, pretty much. So in terms of the second one, this is absurd just because it implies that something pops into existence from nothing, but from nothing, nothing comes. And to talk about things popping into nothing is to describe nothing as if it is something. Yeah, it's to describe it with certain qualities, that there is like a space of some sort that things can pop into. This is like the sort of what's his name, Lawrence Krauss type of something nothing. It's like, oh, yes, the universe came from nothing. Here, let me write a whole book explaining all of the many qualities that this nothing has.
Yeah, to be honest, all these kind of options, I never accept to even give them a reply, to be honest with you, because it's impossible. It's evident that it's impossible. Yeah, so yeah. I don't address them at all.
Yeah, and it's I think it's rather simple as well for the average person to quite get. It's not that difficult. That if something pops in from nothing, you're treating nothing as if it is something. That is, you're saying that this thing that has no attributes has attributes. And so it's a contradiction again. So you're saying this nothing, this thing that we call whatever, has the attribute of being nothing, that is X, but also being something, because it is something that things can pop into. It gives rise to things somehow, which again is a contradiction. So the only other thing is this one. And the main thing is that they think that for some reason, the fact that there is an infinite quantity, that this negates need for an explanation of the set as a whole. And I would say that that isn't true. And then it goes back to what we were saying before, which was that if you just have a pile of things and everything in that pile is contingent, whether it's a finite number or whether it's an infinite number, the pile as a whole is still contingent. And so this thing does not get this random attribute from nowhere, because it is not the type of attribute. I would say the burden is on them. So they would accuse us of making a fallacy of composition. And I would say that that's not true, because I would say contingency, as far as we're concerned, always, regardless of the number, like if you've got one contingent thing, you would say that pile of things is contingent. If you've got 10, that pile of things is contingent. If you've got 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000, that pile of things is always contingent. It's never the case that it's not. So why all of a sudden do they want us to accept this notion that because you've made it an infinite quantity, that somehow makes the pile not contingent. I would say that the burden is on them to show why would make this random inference. And like, for example, if I was to say to you, what's a good example? Like, like with atoms, yeah, they do studies on atoms. They make inferences from that. Now the question is what's the data set? The data set is really small. How many atoms have they done experiments on to be able to deduce what they have deduced about atoms? What do you reckon the percentages? It's somewhat ridiculously small. It's going to be like 0.000. There's too many atoms in the universe, yeah? But they do lots of experiments on atoms to be able to deduce certain things about them. And then they talk about the things that they deduce as if they apply to atoms as a whole, despite the fact that the data set is incredibly tiny compared to the whole. And they're making, inference to the set of all atoms based on experiments with a tiny percentage. Now, that isn't unreasonable, I would say, because if you've got a certain consistency that keeps popping up over and over and over and over and over again, then you become justified in making that inference. Yeah. And I would say the same thing with contingency. If like every single pile of contingent things we ever gather is always itself contingent, then why would we make an exception now for the pile of all contingent things? Where's this exception coming from? There needs to be an adequate explanation as to where that exception is coming from.
So I think that when you mentioned that the traits, the difference in the traits, that that's how we figure out whether the fallacy of composition is applicable or not. I think that's a very good reply. That's a very good explanation, because when it comes to contingency, that cannot be applied at all. That trait. It's just like yeah.
And the point is that like for me, if you keep getting this result that every time you get a pile of contingent things, is the pile itself is always contingent. I would say we have more data on the fact that piles of contingent things are themselves always contingent than we do for pretty much anything else that we make inferences from within the scientific community that are quite readily accepted. Inferences about animals, inferences about how, cells work. Like if you look at the amount of cells in existence and the amount that they manage to do experiments on, or like when they're doing research into, like the data set is always tiny compared to the whole thing. Yeah. And if you see a consistency in the data set, it's reasonable to make that inference to the whole set. And I would say the same thing if you're looking at contingent things, that whenever you have a collection of contingent things, that collection is always has been, and as far as I see, is always going to be itself contingent. And so why could you not make the inference to the whole here? I would say they need a good explanation to be able to say that this would be unreasonable to make the move that we've made there. I'd say that there's more of a burden on them to show that the alternative proposition that this pile of contingent things gets this opposite or this randomly given attribute necessity from nowhere. It's like everything in this like every rag in the basket is wet, but the pile of rags as a whole is dry. Like, why are you making this inference to something completely other? You understand? Like, where's that coming from? Because independence is the opposite of dependence. Yeah, necessity is the opposite of contingency. And if you want to give the pile the complete opposite attribute of everything in the pile, you better give me a good bloody explanation as to how that's happened.
We can't say that they are dependent on each other, obviously, because otherwise we're gonna fall into the circular.
Yes, which would be the first one. Yeah. And the only other thing is you could say that it's a finite chain. And then if it is a finite chain, I guess this could be broken up into two. So either they say that the first thing came from nothing, or they say there's a finite chain that goes back, and then everything relies on this first thing. And it's like, well, if everything relies on the first thing, and it's a finite chain, what does the first thing rely upon? If they've refused to say that it relies on something else in the chain, they're only going to either go back to this, or they're going to posit that this thing is necessary. And then it's like, okay, so then we're here. You're saying there is a chain of things. The number is irrelevant, whether it's a finite amount, an infinite amount. But the set of all of these things is dependent upon something. And the question is, well, what is this? It can't be dependent, because if it was, it would be in the set. Yeah, it would be in the set already. So if the set as a whole is dependent, and it has to rely on something outside of the set, then what is that thing? It can't be an impossible existence, because that doesn't make any sense. So the only other option is that it has to be a necessary being, if you're making the argument from necessity, or from contingency in the sense of possible existence, or of an independent being, if you're making an argument from dependence. Do you follow? And so you have this. Now, if they're saying this thing here is just...
Sorry, just something that popped up in my mind. Like, okay, so like when we Muslims, when we define God subhanahu wa ta'ala, the cause for the universe, for the explanation to the universe, the existence of the universe, right? We are talking here about attributes like you said, like, for example, that God does exist. It doesn't require an explanation. It has always been there. It's independent, necessary, and so on. Okay, now what if they say, like, this energy, that you are talking about, and you are saying that there is a linear chain of causality and so on. It has always been there. The same definition that we give to God, they give it to that energy that has, that is changing its forms. So they describe this universe as an enclosed space. Energy, whatever that is, whatever, even let's say even matter has always existed, and it's only changing forms.
Yeah.
Like, you understand? Like,
no, I get you.
I don't know what to say. Like, yeah.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, basically that you have a closed unit with a finite amount of stuff in it that's always existed, and it just changes constantly.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So the question is like, when they're talking about energy, what is energy? Now, if energy is just an attribute, that it is a power. If they're talking about energy as being necessary, what they're talking about is there is some attribute that exists that is necessary, or that has some sort of necessary component to it. Now, the thing is energy, roughly speaking, is a very vague term. Yeah. And it doesn't refute the Islamic perspective or a theistic position, because we say Allah Azza wa Jal, or God, the creator, has attributes. And one of those attributes is power. He is the all-powerful. He has power. And so he creates with his power. So pointing out that there is energy, it's like, okay, but what is it? If energy is an attribute, what does the energy subsist in? Now, if they want to just say it's just the universe, then what they're talking about is like, they're talking about an attribute that doesn't exist in anything. Like, they're talking about energy as if energy is the fundamental thing, rather than it being an attribute of something. You follow?
Yeah, I'm trying to follow. Yes.
So attributes always subsist in something, yeah.
All right.
So if you can Muslim, the term Muslim, does that
okay. I got your point. Yes.
Yeah. Or strength, strong. You can't talk about strong without reference to a subject. Yeah, mubtada khabar. Like every khabar, every predication has a subject, a mubtada that it subsists in. Yeah.
Okay.
Khabars don't exist on their own. You understand?
Okay. So energy is associated with matter. We can't just have energy while we don't have matter. Is this what you're trying to say?
No, it's not just that it's matter, it's that it subsists in something. Like it's an attribute. So like,
Okay.
and matter is dependent upon energy. But if energy subsists in something and matter is dependent upon energy, then where's this energy coming from? Like just pointing out that there's this energy that's just existing on its own seems quite strange, especially when they just talk about it as being potential. Like it's the potential to do work. It's this, it's that. It's not like it's an entity in and of itself. So it's what I'm saying is that like if they keep making reference to some sort of eternal energy,
Yeah.
as far as I can see it, it's just synonymous with power. It's like, okay, so how is that something that negates the notion of theism, which posits that there is an entity that has power? It has an attribute, which is power. They just, rather than calling it power, they want to focus on this word energy. But
Okay.
energy, when you define it, is the potential to do work. It is the way they describe it as an attribute. There's a semantical game that's going on at the bottom of this conversation.
So yeah. So it's just what we have experienced. It's just these things, the explanations that we are going to give to this problem of existence, this explanation of existence, is going to be within it, from it. It's only these things that are within the universe that we have got to experience, so we know, which is the energy, the way we know it, matter, the way we know it, and those attributes that we are given to the necessary being, who doesn't require something else to cause its existence. They just give these attributes to this kind of thing, to the universe itself.
So I'll show you. I'll try to explain it maybe in a bit more detail. So
yeah. I'm trying to understand. I promise.
No, I know. Don't worry, because it's in its essence. No pun intended.
Yeah.
The conversation is a very, very complex one, and
Okay.
it's normal. It's fine. It's not. I wouldn't feel bad about it. So in terms of the way we've got to understand it is, you have things. You have the universe. Yeah. So this circle is the universe, and then you've got all the things in it. You've got the sun, planet. You've got the trees. You've got me. You've got you, and you can break these things down. Yeah. To the atom. So the atom is a bunch of protons and neutrons that are surrounded by electrons, and these electrons, we can't. The picture's a bit misleading that they teach us when we're going to school, but they exist in sort of like a potential field. Like we can talk about them in terms of percentages, like the likeliness that the electron is here or there. But it's a strange thing. So this thing is made up of parts, and we can take these things here. So we can take the proton or the fundamental parts off an atom, and we can break them up into even more fundamental parts, and so on and so forth, until you get to the quarks or whatever it is that CERN is discovering now and they refer to as the most fundamental layer, of reality. Now, if you remember from what they said, let me pull up that article again. So here, the origin. So as the universe cooled, conditions became just right to give rise to the building blocks of matter, the quarks and the electrons, of which we are all made. So if we go back now to that picture, so you got this chain. So this here, so you've got this here is made up of this, which is made up of this, which is made up of this, which is made up of this. And then at the bottom, you've got the fundamental things. But these things began to exist. These fundamental building blocks began to exist. And so you have this sort of like horizon where they just talk about this very vague thing, which we just call energy. What is energy?
Sorry, just one second. So, okay, just like it's not like that I'm opposing the idea. I'm just like for you to help me articulate it nicely. So, how did we jump from that electron, pop into existence? Why would you say that it started to exist? Why does it has it not always been there?
Because they that's what they've discovered, that the early conditions of the universe gave rise to the conditions that would allow. Can you see here? So as the universe cooled, conditions became just right to give rise to. That's the key word. So these things were given rise to by these conditions. That is, they began to exist. The building
Hmm.
blocks of matter. So the quarks and the electrons. So the quarks, the fundamental particles of matter, are themselves reliant upon something more fundamental. This fundamental thing is the energy, hot, dense energy.
But these people don't believe in the universe started existing.
No, they
Then
do. They just want to posit that there's some sort of eternal cycle.
okay,
So
okay.
that what they're saying is that there's so if we go back, so I don't think you can deny that the Big Bang happened. The question is like you've got the Big Bang and then you've got everything that comes from it, and so then this is like the modern
Yeah,
universe.
it's super easy. Subhanallah, yani, it's self-evident as soon as the person believes that the universe started, began to exist, then obviously everything else falls into place.
Yeah,
What
but what they want to
what
posit
makes
is like
it
the
difficult for me?
multiverse.
When they deny that,
Yeah, so
that's
and then this goes back into this sort of ultimate unlimited chain thing, which is quite frustrating to deal with because the question is okay, so now you have this very complex universe generator, which is itself something that is giving rise to things. Okay, so what is this multiverse generator? And then like again, they're making inferences now to things that are beyond empirical. So they're doing things that they complain about when it comes to like there's no evidence for a multiverse. Yeah, this is all hypothetical. These are theories that they have to come up with to try to understand the way in which like they're making these inferences because they're looking at the data and they're like, you've got these very, very finely tuned conditions. What are the chances? They're quite low. Okay, well, how is it that we could get something like this with these very low chances? Well, there's a number of possible explanations. Either it could be a god, or it could be a multiverse, or it could be a this, or it could be that. So they try to posit certain things to suggest that it's possible. One of them is there's an infinite number of universes, an unquantifiable amount. Another is that the amount of, but if it's an unquantifiable amount, then you have this like unlimited pool of energy. And then the question is, so you mentioned the law of thermodynamics. So what is it that makes the system close? Like here, so the law of thermodynamics says that this is the universe A, the universe we live in. It had a beginning. It was given rise to by something else, an early, the multiverse generator or whatever. But the amount of energy that's in this is set. It cannot increase or decrease.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yes,
that's the law of
yeah.
thermodynamics. But the thing is if this universe began to exist, this one, if it had a big bang, yeah, then
Brother,
what
sorry,
reason?
brother Yusuf,
Yeah,
just so that I am really genuine and I'm following up and I'm really going to, because I'm really trying to understand. Okay, so what did you again say to the person who claims that the universe it has always been there? It didn't begun to exist, like it has always been there. Like, sorry, could you just explain that again for me? Because yeah,
yeah. So if they say that the universe has always existed,
yeah.
I would say, so what? Whether it's finite or infinite, it still needs an explanation for why it exists rather than doesn't. And I don't think stating that the universe itself is a necessary being
Mm-hmm.
is sufficient. because that is to state what we've stated before with the previous discussion, that there is a pile of contingent things that
Yes.
gives rise to the opposite attribute. That a pile of wet rags as a whole is somehow dry, even though every rag in the pile is wet.
Okay.
Yeah? And I'm saying, okay, if you want to suggest that, you need to give me a good argument as to why I should accept that that is a more likely possibility than the case that the pile of wet rags as a whole is wet. Or the pile of contingent things as a whole is contingent. Yeah, out of the two possibilities, I don't think that they're like equally possible. I think one is much more reasonable than the other, unless you can give me a very, very good reason as to why I shouldn't think that. Yeah.
Okay.
So don't worry, because this is like a big conversation, and it branches off into many, many topics, and you're trying to sort of see how this web of discussions fits. And this is
so
why
I'm trying to sorry, I'm just really trying to understand. Yeah, because I think you're right, because here, if we accept this idea, then necessarily we'll have to accept that there is a necessary being within this universe to explain all those kind of contingent beings that are within it. And obviously, because that's an impossibility, it can't. We can't have a set of contingent things and then have a necessary being within it. Has to be outside of it. Yeah, and therefore that's God.
So there's a number of other arguments, because this is quite a big conversation. Obviously, people can get impatient, and they sort of want all of it in one go. They want like a two premise argument. Premise one, premise two, conclusion, therefore God exists. So this is an argument for a necessary being or an independent being. And then there's another discussion, because you've got phase one, phase two, phase three. Phase one is to argue for the existence of a necessary being that has certain qualities. Like, for example, its non-existence is impossible. Yeah, that is, it's eternal. It always has existed, always will exist. It is independent. It does not rely on other things for its existence. It's the source of all power. Yeah, it's so on and so forth. So these things are like level one, and then level two is to try to make an argument now from, okay, if this thing exists, is it what we could describe as a god? Is it a personal agent? Yeah, so now you're going to start to make inferences to other attributes like life, a will, knowledge, wisdom, intelligence. Yeah, that's stage two, and you can do that, but it's just that's later on down the argument. You've just got to sort of convince them at the first stage before you can move on to the second. And we would say that yes,
sorry, brother, can we just jump straight to revelation from there? Because I think that we have absolutely no way to prove those other attributes outside of revelation itself.
So I think that I agree with a lot of attributes. You can't do that. That you require revelation to say anything about that being. I would say there are some that you can. Like, for example, you can say that this being is intelligent if it is the source of all of this. Yeah, and you have the evidence of design in things, like, for example, in your own existence, like Allah says in the Quran, there are signs in the heavens and the earth and within your own selves for those who ponder. Yeah, there are signs. Ayat of Allah's existence in creation. You look at creation, you can make inferences to the majesty of the one that made it. And so if we're saying there is this being that exists eternally, these are attributes of Allah. So and they're not anti-Quranic, because Allah refers to himself as the eternal, the ever-living, which is to say he's necessary and that he will not perish. Everything will perish besides Allah. Yeah, Allah is the eternal one. That is to say, his non-existence is impossible. He will not exist. He will not cease to exist. He's necessary. that's what that means. Necessary means the non-existence for this being is impossible. Yeah. So you can make an argument to that attribute, and then you say, okay, so if everything is reliant upon this necessary being, it must be the source of all power. All power belongs to it. Whatever power there is has come from it. Yeah. So it has and this one thing that it's created is unquantifiably large, with an unimaginable amount of power. So the thing that gave rise to it must have at least that, if not more, power. So it's very, very, very powerful. Yeah. Then you would ask, okay, well, is it intelligent? And if I'm looking at, like, if I find this pair of scissors in the desert, yeah, and then I say to the atheist, oh, there's been 14 billion years on the planet, in the universe, sorry, plenty of time. I reckon this was an accident. I reckon there's nothing intelligent behind this. It's just atoms hit atoms, some rock hit another rock, and they just kept doing it. And then, given enough time, this formed randomly, without a creator, by accident. They'd laugh at me. They wouldn't accept that. The whole process of archaeology is looking for things that show the signs, the telltale signs of design. This is one of them. It's a relatively simple object. But it's so that it's not likely to have been given rise to by accident. So, like, you've got a piece of paper, and it's got these little holes that are conveniently placed for these digits, and you can open it, and it has a pivot that's got a screw. It's got little pictures on it. Somewhere it's probably got "made in China" written on it, or stainless steel. It's got a number of parts that work together to provide a greater function. That is to cut pieces of paper, and its edges are sharp. It's got this is plastic, so it's comfortable. Like, there's just too much in it. The way they all work together, it's too convenient to suggest that it's the process of randomness, because it's got these signs. And by the way, these are the same things that they look for, these qualities, when they're looking for aliens in outer space. When they're looking for intelligent life, they look for complexity that's not likely to have been given rise to by randomness. Yeah, and this could be for things that we've never experienced. There may be some crazy alien technology that they might stumble upon, and they would make the inference despite having never experienced anything like that ever. Yeah, so the argument is the only reason because we know these are things that humans make. But, like, there's all sorts of things that you could stumble upon that you've never experienced. Like, if you go back in time to, like, the medieval period, before this, for example, this wonderful device here that keeps me cool during the hot weather. Like, they could make an inference to the fact that this was designed by something intelligent, despite never having seen anything like it before, because it's got a number of attributes which make it reasonable to make that inference. Yeah. Now, if there is a necessary being that's independent, and we are all dependent upon it for our existence, and there are telltale signs of intelligence in our design, I would say that is reasonable enough to make the inference that the thing that created us is itself intelligent. So, for example, like, if I show you this watch, it's much more complex than this. Yeah, it's got many more parts that work together to play a larger function, and it has many more roles. And if I was to suggest this was the product of randomness and they were to laugh at me, they would laugh at me even harder if I was to suggest that was. Yeah. Why? Because it increases in them particular qualities. And then you could go bigger. I could show you my phone. I don't know where my phone is. Imagine I've got my phone in my hand. I show you my phone. That's even more complex. I show you my computer. That's even more complex than the phone. I show you a mega city that's been built in outer space by some unfathomably intelligent alien civilization, despite having never seen anything like it. Yeah, you can make the inference this isn't the product of randomness. This is the product of intelligent design. Now, the thing is as you increase in that complexity, you increase in the justification for making that inference. Now, when you're looking at the human being and you just take one living cell, and you look at the complexity that's in that, the way that these things work, all the parts in a cell, the way they work together to produce more cells, which all stick together to produce this big dangly thing that's the human body. It's unfathomably complex in the way that the parts work together for a greater function. It's not random. Like, you don't refer to the heart and the function of the heart as being a random process. No, you refer to it as an organ that has a function, that has a role to play, that it is there to do something. That is, yeah, it has a purpose. But where does it get that purpose from? The atheist wants to posit that it doesn't really. The idea of it having a purpose is an illusion. It doesn't really have a purpose, because it's a random process. It's completely broken from any notion of intelligence, of any notion of consciousness. So it doesn't make sense to refer to it as having a function, because function is something given to things by intelligent beings. This pair of scissors has a function, that is to cut paper, because it was designed with that function in mind. Yeah, and function is tied to this notion of design, which is tied to the notion of something intelligent. But if the fundamental building blocks of the universe, of existence, is just dead matter, yeah, then it doesn't make sense to talk about organs as having functions. This is a misuse of language, because ultimately they're just like atoms have hit atoms in such a peculiar way that this heart accidentally gives rise to something which we perceive to be a function, but it is not actually the case from an atheistic perspective. But I think it's very clear that it does have a function, that it does have a purpose, and that we can make inferences to design because of certain attributes present in things, and that the human being is much more worthy of being said to have been designed than this pair of scissors or this Apple Watch. And if it is, and if the universe as a whole, yeah, is much more, as a system, is itself something that could be said to be complex to the degree that it provides function in terms of the parts, and all of these things interplay together to provide like a larger functioning of things. The universe as a whole is something, not just the human being especially, but the universe as a whole has, I think, a reasonable inference towards the notion of something that designed it. There's a good book we're reading at the moment, The Return of the God Hypothesis. Sort of goes over all of these. Gets a bit boring to the end, but there's a good book on this idea of that science isn't getting rid of this notion of intelligent design. It's feeding it. And so
is this book supports the idea that you are trying to explain, or is it
so this is argument for extra attributes of this being. So if everything is dependent upon this thing, and if you can make good inference to the fact that this thing is knowledgeable, that it's wise, that's another good reason to say that it's alive, because knowledge and wisdom subsist in conscious things. If it's independent, like another thing, yeah. Say if I've got rocks. Don't ask me why I've got rocks, but I like the shape of these ones, so I collect them and put them on my mantelpiece. But like this rock,
yep.
If it does nothing, we're not surprised by that. Now, if I move my hand down like that and it falls, yeah, there's movement. Something happens. It goes from one place to another. You've got good reason to think what's going on there. Yeah, you don't attribute consciousness to the rock. If you're walking through the hills and you see a boulder roll down the hill, you don't attribute consciousness to the boulder. Yeah, you don't attribute life to it. But there are things that you do attribute life to. Whether or not you've seen them before is irrelevant. It could be a bug. It could be a strange creature. It could be a worm. like they could, like even the things that we didn't even imagine, like the bacteria when they were first discovered. We couldn't fathom the kind of weird things that existed at the quantum level. Thinking Ant-Man now. At the cellular level. Yeah, we'd never seen that small before until the invention of the microscope, and then even further with the electron microscope. We could never fathom how weird the microscopic world was. Yeah, but these things, you see them and you recognize to a degree that there is consciousness in them. There is life. They are interact. Like, have you seen the what they call the water bears? Is it a water bear? You know what I mean? Water bear. This thing. Like, these things are weird. Like, look at that. This is a microscopic thing. Like, it lives somewhere. It's like, it's really small. And it's just weird. Like,
is that microscopic?
Yeah. So you recognize it as as having life. It's not a robot. Yeah, it's not like it moves about, and you can watch videos off the water bear on YouTube. And you can see how
This is a water bear under the microscope, and this is what one looks like when it is carrying eggs. This water bear will soon give birth. To do this, it sheds its skin and lays the eggs at the same time.
But you get the point now, that like you see that you recognize it's alive. You recognize that it's moving. Yeah, that it has a different type of existence than the rock. Yeah, and it could be this water bear, it could be a bug, it could be a lizard, it could be whatever. Yeah, when you recognize the difference between dead things and living things. Yeah, and and this rock might convince you it's alive if it was to just get up and it was to start moving around the tabletop, and then it was to go to the edge of the table and then look over and then come back and start shivering and then run to the other side. Like, you can recognize when something is alive because the way that it acts is it looks as if it's self-propelled. Yeah, it's not like the rock when it rolls down a hill.
Making decisions and in its movements.
Yes, and that this is internal to it, not external to it. Like when the rock falls down the hill, it's because someone's pushed it down. Like there's a YouTube channel called like Man News, and he just shows like content of men pushing rocks down hills into the lake below. Like, you can recognize if you saw the rock rolling that the men at the top pushed it down because they want to see a big splash. Yeah, you can recognize that the reason for its movement is external to it. It's not an internal decision within itself. Yeah. Whereas with life, you recognize that it's making decisions. Now, the thing is if you've got an independent existence that is separate from the collection of dependent existences that depend upon it. Yeah. And these things are being created by it. You have to ask the question, why is it creating these things? Why is it creating things? You can't make an explanation like with the rock to something outside of itself for why it does what it does. Yeah. You have to make reference to the thing in and of itself because it's an independent existence. It exists on its own. And this is what we would readily understand to be what is a will. When things choose to do things, it is choosing to create one thing rather than another. It's not being caused to by something external to it. Because it's the end of that chain. And that's what we call a will. And again, if you supplement that with the argument from design for attributes of knowledge and wisdom and intelligence, essentially what you're getting now is this idea of a theistic God, which is the second phase. So phase one is to argue for a necessary existence. Phase two for an intelligent designer. And now what we're doing is we're ticking off the attributes of Allah. Who is Allah? Allah is the ever living. Yeah. which is to say a necessary existence. He always has existed. He always will exist. He will not cease to exist. Yeah, this is from the Quran and the Sunnah. He's a necessary existing being. He exists necessarily.
Brother,
Always has.
I would like to just briefly, so that I don't take longer of your time. Would you be able to list, يعني, give me bullet points of how you do articulate about يعني revelation? What are the things that you are using to prove the truthfulness of obviously the Quran and the revelation that talks about these attributes or God's attributes and so on? Like the next step.
Yeah, so what I do is I generally supplement it with both. So like, and it depends who you're talking to. You might not need to go through many of these things with certain people. Like if you're talking to Christians, you don't need to prove a necessary existent intelligent being to them. So you just go straight to the final step, stage 3, which is to prove Islam, and you would make reference to, for example, good reasons why the Quran is the word of Allah, for example, the word of the thing that we've just we already agree on it. You can skip stage 1 and 2, yeah, because the Christian believes in a theistic God, so you don't need to make an argument from contingency for them. Yeah, you don't need to go down that route. You can just go straight to Quran, straight to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and make reference to these things. Now, there are obviously, with regards to Allah's attributes, you're making links between them. So Allah is the self-subsisting, which is to say He's independent. And so you could make mention of the verses in the Quran and the Sunnah that make mention of Allah being independent in His existence, being the self-subsisting. You can make reference to the Quranic verses where it's saying that He is the ever-living, that He always will exist and He will never perish, and everything will perish save His face. He's the only thing that will continue to exist. So, like, in terms of, like, in a necessary sense, that it's Allah's existence is necessary. It always has been, and you can point to these, and then you say, and Allah is the all-knowing. Okay, are there good reasons to believe in an all-knowing being? Yeah, there are plenty of good reasons. Even many of the brothers anti-philosophy make philosophical arguments using the design inference. Yeah, so like they're fine with it. You can make inference to wisdom, which is another attribute of Allah. You can make reference to His power, to His strength, yeah, to the fact that He is all powerful. Like, and so there's a number of attributes, but then you get to certain attributes where philosophy argumentation is not going to get you anywhere. In the same way that, like, if someone was to give you the task now to try to argue about what's behind this screen, yeah, so you can see everything that's in this box, but what's behind it? Yeah. Now, if you didn't have any information, if you've not seen it already in another video, and all you've got is this information here, you can't really use reason to make inferences to the things outside of your experience or outside of any knowledge by testimony. Now, with certain attributes, when it comes to Allah, we would say this is the case. You would have to let Allah speak for Himself and to tell you what those attributes were. And so this is the necessity of revelation. Like, is Allah merciful? Is Allah loving? Does Allah hate? You know, what is it why did Allah create? Yeah, with reason alone and the experience of anything in the world, you're not necessarily going to get to the bottom of that. Yeah, without that testimony from a trustworthy source, and that would be either from the prophets or from Allah Himself. So this is where you would say, okay, so are there any good candidates for that revelation? Is there anything that could be put forward as potentially being from that being from the Creator? And then you could start to say, okay, well, let's look at it. We've got a couple of candidates here. We've got the Torah, we've got the Bible, we've got the Quran, we've got the Vedas. Which one of these is more likely to be a candidate of being from that God? And then when you do a comparison, I would say, and obviously just because of time, we're an hour and a half in, so we're going to wrap up soon. But in terms of like the quality of the Quran with regards to many of the categories that would make it a good candidate. It trumps the Bible, it trumps the Old Testament, it trumps the Vedas, it trumps all of its competitors. It makes accurate predictions.
Sorry to interrupt, just to ask a question. So it's like, for example, I've been trying to compile the evidences that you know that prove obviously Islam based on revelation, and like for example, could we say like for example we use the scientific evidences, scientific you know miracles from the Quran. We can use, for example, the historical evidences. For example, also archaeology. You know,
Yeah.
when it's mentioned in the Quran, like for example, Surah Yusuf. No, it's mentioned in the Quran. The king is not a pharaoh, so like, so I was trying to compile the evidences that are outside of the you know like so they wouldn't argue, oh, you know, you're just defending your prophet. You're saying he was known to be trustworthy, etc., etc., but we don't believe you. No one argued against him in regards to this and that. We don't believe you. You know, that category of people who don't believe in testimony, they don't believe in these kind of things. So
They do, though. They do. And this is another thing. See, it doesn't just have to.
Like, I don't like to waste
No, I
too
know.
much time with them, so I just like to lay down those other evidences, and then if it doesn't work, then yeah.
Yeah, it's you've just got to with dawah.
Yeah.
Don't fight every battle. Like there's some people that will strike you as sincere, and you should invest your time with them. And you don't even need to take this hyper philosophical route with all of them. Like Ibn Taymiyyah, he was in favor of a multitude of paths, and so he would say, like, and not to talk of it in like a Hindu sense, but he would say that like the philosophical arguments might be necessary for a certain category of people, and they may be in the minority. There may be a very small number of people. The majority of people might not need you to go through that amount. Many people will accept it because it is an inclination towards their fitrah. They might need a lot less. Yeah, and there may not be as many barriers within their heart to accepting Islam. So, like for example, with the Christians, we don't have to go down this whole contingency route with them. Alhamdulillah, like you could just talk to them about whether or not like Isa alayhi salam. We can talk to them about him. We can talk to them about their Bible, whether or not it's a reliable source of information, and whether or not the Quran is. We can talk about how are they explaining Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like what they want to try to posit him as some sort of devil worshipper. Well, the devil did a pretty terrible job at producing Islam when we were all constantly cursing the devil. We're worshipping one God. We're shunning idols. Like the devil's done a terrible job at creating a religion that takes you away from the worship of God when that's its entire focus, the worship of one God, which is the same message that Isa brought, Jesus alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Noah alayhi salam. So there's, and basically there's, yeah, I would just say deal with people on a personal level, like assess them with a sincerity, assess them in terms of what they need. Don't just jump in with this, what we've been going through. Because not everyone's got the patience. You see, even within the believers, like we've got many brothers, they get very impatient with this because we're using a lot of words that go over their head. And they just don't want to sit down and think about it because sometimes they get a little bit confused. And then they'll hear an objection by an atheist and go, oh, this, that, and the other. And then that makes them scared because their iman wavers very easily. And people push back against it because they don't want to, they see it as a waste of time. And it is for a lot of people. It's not a problem. And you don't have to give everyone the same medicine because different people incline to different things. Even the way we were talking, like I'm a visual learner. I love drawing pictures, giving diagrams, making arrows. crossing things off so you can see what we've done, what we've not, going through the stages of something. Like, I love all of that. Some people hate it. Absolutely hate it. Like, if you start breaking things down into all of its parts, people don't want that. Some people just want you to move them. Some people want to, they want some sort of revelatory experience. They want the magic, quote unquote. Different people want different things, and so like you have to be careful not to just apply the same brush with everyone. Treat people as individuals. This is the whole point of my book as well. It's like sometimes you can sort of push people away from Islam by overcomplicating things for them. And so I don't put this in the first thing I pull out. This is the conversation I have with people who are interested in it, people who are comfortable with the language, or people who are at least patient enough or willing to think about it and learn about the language without panicking. Because what you find is one of the biggest issues is when people deal with more complex issues like this, or the more philosophical parts, they go into a meltdown and they start getting worried because it's just an overload of information. And this is where I think, the sort of anti philosophy in the broad sense camp, that's what they're worried about, is like people being overwhelmed by these words and this information that might damage their man. And it does. Some people, I speak to them all the time, where like, and sometimes I'll be going in this like never-ending loop with someone, and then eventually I'll say, listen, you're picking fights above your weight. Like, you're getting confused with simple terms. Well, they're not simple, but you're getting confused with like the most basic terminology within the discussion. You keep making errors in terms of categories and things like that. You like one problem, for example, some people get mixed up with is we're talking about a necessary being. We're talking about ontology, about the essence of something being necessary, and then they'll start talking about causal necessity, which is a completely different discussion. But because the word necessity is in there, they think it's the same thing, and they go, "Oh, but you're a necessary being because of determinism, because everything was set in place, was inevitably going to give rise to you, and you were always going to exist. Therefore, you're necessary." No, that's a different subject completely. It's not the same thing. And just because the same word is being used here, it doesn't mean it's the same conversation. In the same way I can say the tree is made of bark and that dog just barked, you can't then jump to the conclusion that the dog is made of wood, which is what some people do. They just hear the same word and their brains are not really attuned to that specific subject yet. So they miss these things. And it's very easy to fall into these mistakes when you're first looking into it, especially if you lack patience. And this is one of the biggest issues. And this is why generally I just wouldn't use these type of arguments. I enjoy them a lot. And I do think they are sound. It's the same as like my favorite argument is the argument from independence. I got that from Ibn Taymiyyah. I got from him going through it and explaining where the philosophers, like the Mu'tazilites, got it wrong. And like, for example, there's was it Ibn Sina? I can't remember which one it was. That wanted to argue for the eternality of the universe as like a coexisting entity with Allah that was necessary as well. So the way that he spoke about the universe was as if it was eternal, co-eternal with Allah. And he is going through.
It's coming from Allah's will.
Say again?
It's not objectively necessary. It's not objectively necessary. He's saying that it's necessary because Allah willed for it to exist.
Yeah, so but the point mainly is just that he was making an argument that the universe was co-eternal. And Ibn Taymiyyah was going through the mistakes that this philosopher's made and explained to him why that's not how you should understand it. But like this idea that Ibn Taymiyyah is not philosophically minded. So there's a book done by a friend of mine on Ibn Taymiyyah, called Ibn Taymiyyah Creation Ex Materia. And like and on this it's like it,
can I have a look again in Arabic, please? Al-khalqu والإفناء.
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is one of his philosophical works, where he's arguing for a controversial position within Islamic Aqidah, that Allah creates out of other things. So, like, he believed that things existed, or that Allah is always creating, that there is an infinite series of events, but not an infinite series of causal links. So he believes that Allah is the ultimate cause of all the things, but he's always, everything perishes, everything is created, everything apart from Allah is contingent, and it begins, and so there is no co-eternal existence like it is with, for example, as Ibn Sina sees it. He says, no, Ibn Sina got it wrong. He's saying, no, everything is contingent. There is no co-eternality with Allah. Allah is the only eternal being. Everything will perish. Everything perishes. Everything ceases to exist and comes into existence, begins and ends, and Allah makes things out of other things. But like, that's his opinion, and it's an interesting one. Whether or not it's the right one is up for debate, but it's not like this idea that he was like anti-rationality, anti-philosophy is just not true. Like the argument I use, the argument from dependence, came from Ibn Taymiyyah in particular, and his ideas are that you pick depending on who it is you're talking to. I'm not going to talk like I'm an Ibn Taymiyyah scholar. I'm not, but like, you know, I've looked into his ideas enough to see that it's not this black and white mentality that people have. You know, he did engage in this particular discussions. But it's all about picking and choosing your battles. Like, some people don't need it. Some people, they might only need the design argument. You may only need to talk to them about the fact that, you know, look at the universe. The universe is quite clearly designed. Therefore, there's a creator. That might be enough to spark someone's fitrah and get them to take shahada. And if you've got them there, then alhamdulillah, like, you've done your job. And you didn't have to, if you didn't have to beat around the bushes to get them to the truth, why beat around the bushes to get them to the truth? Some people just need a social environment. Some people just need good friends. You take them away from the fitna, you take them away from alcohol, you take them away from the drugs and the zina, and they can see the wisdom of the Quran, of the Sharia, by living it. And they recognize the wisdom of the book of the Quran, and they can take shahada from that. One of the things that impacted me was the rulings, and I'm looking at the Sharia, something that's a majorly controversial thing, and I'm asking, would the community I grew up in, would they be better or worse if they followed the Sharia, if they didn't practice zina, if they didn't drink, if they didn't smoke, if they didn't take drugs, they didn't gamble, if they didn't take all these loans with interest, if they committed to these relationships as if there was something honorable in them, if they upheld their duties to one another, to their neighbors, to their family, if there was a clear sense of gender roles within the family unit, would we be better or worse? And the answer was always, we'd be so much better. My people, the English people, the Polish people, the Scottish people, all of the problems they're facing, many of them could be fixed simply by following the Sharia. That is convincing enough for some people. This is clearly something that's from a wise source. And you go, how is this the product of a man who was a shepherd? You've got some guy who just looks after sheep and camels. He's a herder, a shepherd, and somehow he's producing something that organized societies from the individual to the communal, to the societal, to the global scale in such a way as to have the victory that it's had, historically speaking, for it to be the fastest growing religion on the planet still today, despite all of the problems that are currently in motion that negatively affect everything apart from Islam. Go on.
Yeah. Within 23 years, that's a miracle, subhanallah. This reminds me of the ayah that says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he himself is the evidence for Islam himself.
Yeah. And so you might just need to pretend that, and that might be a better route. Yeah, and it might be good to start there. I always start there. I always start with the Quran, with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I talk about this just because people like to talk about it, and for some people it is convincing. I have seen people take shahadas as a result of these conversations, and it's not necessarily this on its own. It's this in conjunction with other things, because the way it works is it's like a scale. Yeah, of either I'm convinced or I'm not convinced. And one argument isn't enough to tip the scale all the time. And sometimes you've got to take stones off the opposite side. So sometimes it might be trauma. Like you might be talking to someone and they just refuse to believe in God because they went through some crap in their life and they can't conceive of how God would do that to them. They can't rationalize it. They can't see any wisdom in it. They just see it as mindless violence against them. And it might just take talking about, like, listen, it's very conceivable that this was for a wise reason. Look at who you've become. Look at the strength. Like for example, some of the best people I know are people that have struggled more than anyone. And they became amazing people as a consequence of the crap that they went through. But I know other people that went the other way. They went through crap and then became a murderer, ended up in prison for life. I know people that ended up committing suicide or whatever because they went through crap and they made certain choices that took them down the wrong way. But it doesn't have to be like that. Some people can go through things that are even worse. I know people that have committed suicide for crappier reasons than the things that that I know that are alive today. Like the people that are alive today that have very, very good qualities, that have been through so much crap. If anyone was going to commit suicide, they like, and if you would compare it to the other people that I know that did, I'd say this person is probably more justified in ending their life than you are. And yet you took that option, you took that route out. But this person chose not to, and look at the quality of their character. Look at them as a person. There's you can see wisdom in it. It's possible. Like even myself, one of the things that made me atheist when I was younger was the crap that I went through. I just couldn't conceive, why would God kill my dad? Why, the way that he did? Why would he die of a heroin overdose? Why is it that all these people around me are dying and suffering and blah, 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 blah? This is one thing that pushed me towards atheism. But it doesn't take that much thinking to think of how these things can have wisdom in them, how they can shape people, how they can motivate good character if the person just makes the right choices. Being in the presence of evil, you can either become like that and get on board with them, or you can be brave and repel against it and say, I am going to not do what they're doing. If this happens, you might have two people born to the same parents. The parents might be really crappy. One might turn out a wrong un, and the other one might turn out great. Because one is making a choice to become like their parents, and another one is defining themselves in the opposite way. They refuse to be like them. And so you might just having this conversation with people might be enough to take those stones off of the scale of the side of disbelief. And then you give them arguments, and that may or may not be contingency, depending on the kind of person they are. It may or may not be arguments for the proof of prophethood. It may or may not be arguments for the proof of the Quran. It may just be talking about Tawheed. You may not even need to mention the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ or the Quran. All you need to do is talk to them about monotheism, about Tawheed, and that might be enough for them to accept Islam. It differs depending on the person. It may be they just need a good friend, and you just invite them around and you give them tea and you feed them. And I know people that have taken Shahada simply by the goodwill of the Muslims that have interacted with them. So it's, people are complex, and like everyone has like certain stones that need to be taken off of the scale of disbelief, and certain stones they need added to the scale of belief. And you've got to be socially aware. You've got to deal with people, not like robots, where you just come with like, okay, I have this list of things I need to do. Step 1, talk about contingency. And then like everyone that you come to, it's like, no, contingency. No, we're not having any other conversation. Contingency. No, contingency. Like, that's not how it works. Don't do that. Get to know the person. Understand what it is that makes them tick to the best of your ability. See what kind of obstacles they have in the way of their fitrah. Try to remove those obstacles and get to the base of the problem, and deal with them as a person, as an individual, like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did. How did he deal with people? He dealt with them on an individual basis. He didn't treat every person the same, because different people have different character types, different ways of being. Was it Uthman was shy? I can't remember which of the Sahabi was really shy.
Yeah,
I can't remember. Yeah, Uthman radiallahu anhu. If you compare him to like Umar radiallahu anhu, they're like, in terms of the character types, they're very like, they're obviously, may Allah have mercy on them both and elevate them, but they were both different people. They weren't copy paste of each other, and the way the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with them was on a very individual basis. He didn't treat them both the same. And there's other stories of some of the Sahaba doing like things you just wouldn't imagine someone doing in the presence of a Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But he was patient with them because they were going through this process of development with him while the Quran was being revealed. Like the stories of the Sahaba before the prohibition of alcohol, where they're drunk and one of them kills the camel of another of the Sahabi because he's like, someone sang a poem about what it means to be a man, and he's gone to prove he's a man, and he's slaughtered someone else's camels, and this person's got upset, gone to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Muhammad's gone to the companion and found him drunk, and the quote is like the companion's looking at him, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saying, like, what are you doing? And he says, are you not all the slaves of my father? And then Muhammad ﷺ just walks away and just leaves him because he recognizes at that point the man's drunk. So like, you know, he dealt with people as individuals, yeah, on a personal basis, and different people took shahada for different reasons at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There wasn't just a one shoe fits all mentality. Like Khalid ibn Walid, he was praised as being an intelligent man by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Like, out of all of the people, why is this man not a Muslim? Like, he's one of the most intelligent among the Quraysh. How is it he is not a Muslim? And his praising of this man's intelligence, you know, eventually he took shahada. It was like, he was a clever man. He required a different means to attaining belief. There were different methodologies for each person. Does that make sense? You still there?
Oh yes, I am. I am still there. Yes. So how do we learn how to? It
Deal with
looks
people.
like we have to go through the academy, prophetic academy. Yani the prophet has to teach us. We have to give him company, basically.
Read the Sirah, like, learn. Like, this is the thing. It's just like, involve yourself with the Quran and the Sunnah. Read the Quran. Read the tafsir. Read the you know, the Sirah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, learn about the people that were with him. What were going, like, you'll learn a lot about dawah by looking at that, and then you need to learn about people. And so just engage in conversation with your neighbors, like, speak to them, like, figure out, ask people that have converted, why did you convert, what was it that made the penny drop? And you'll see, like, a variety of reasons, many different things bring people to Islam. And there's an element of intelligence and knowledge and wisdom, but there's also an element of intuition. Like, you might get a feeling like, there's some people I'm speaking to them, I'm like, I'm never mentioning the contingency argument to this guy. Like, I can already feel that his eyes are going to glaze over and all he's going to hear is white noise, and there's going to be no point. Like, I'm not having that conversation with him. He's a simple person. I don't need to overcomplicate it for him. I can just be simple with him and just treat him to a meal or something, take him for a drink, tea, not alcohol. But you know what I mean? Like, just obviously as a sister, the dynamic is going to be a little bit different for you, but you know, obviously just stick within the confines of the Sharia and deal with people to the best of your ability, and just try to learn about people. Don't treat them like robots. Does that make sense? But we'll have to leave it there, just because I need to go home now. Okay. But Jazakallah khair for joining. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I feel like I have spoken to you on the Lighthouse mentoring before. I recognize your voice, although you didn't come on as Tukba.
Yeah, I may. Yeah, I have booked before. Yes.
Okay. Well, like I say, it was a brilliant conversation. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you so much.
And if you need to
that
discuss
was
it more,
really very beneficial, and it did come out clearer to me this time than the previous you know, researches and the conversation we had before as well. Thank you so
Alhamdulillah.
much.
No problem. But yeah, so thank you for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, Udan in the back, I'm going to wrap up. If you want, whatever it is you wish to discuss, I would ask that you book a Lighthouse meeting. So you can see the link here on the screen. You can still have a conversation with us. You just need to book, because I've been on for 2 hours now on my own. And I need to get home for my dinner. It's very late in the UK now. And I also need to go pray Maghrib. I don't know what time you came, but I did state at the beginning, there's no guarantee that if you're in the back, you can come on. We are going to wrap up. We usually only stick around for about an hour and a half. We're nearly at the 2 hour mark now, so we've already gone over a great deal. But if you book a meeting, you can speak privately with one of our mentors. You can ask that question that you wanted to ask, although you've not put it in the back chat. And I'll try to just go through some. Oh, bleeding heck, there's a lot of comments. Let me just run through these comments really quickly. While I'm going through the comments, Udan, if you want to write down what your question was in the back, if it's not too long, I might address it if it's like a quick question. If it's a long one, I'll just ask you to book a meeting, because I'm done for the day. I'm just wondering if this person ever mentioned who he was talking about took the Shahada. Americans do whatever they want to have audiobooks in British accents. I apologize. It wasn't. I don't know. I think maybe the guy did a good job, inshallah. I think he was already a Muslim. Okay. The one who did the audiobook is what you mean. Yeah, I think he's already a Muslim. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What do you think of some Muslims saying Allah didn't make it appear? So I'm not 100% sure what the question is asking. Maybe be a bit clearer in the way you write it, brother. See, Samadi is on the ball. What do you think of rationality thinks? I don't know rationality thinks. Yeah, it's the equivalent of magic, that someone concludes that there is no necessary being, or that something can come from nothing. There are far more powerful reasons to believe a necessary first cause. Yes, I agree. Try to get to the bottom of it. So there's a few questions here. I'd like to say, just recommend booking a meeting. Go to sapiensinstitute.org/lighthouse. We'd be more than happy to have this discussion with you. Alternatively, maybe join us next month. We do have this live on the first Thursday of every month, inshallah. So in September, October, have a look on your calendar, whatever the first Thursday of October is. Just make sure to join then at 6 p.m. UK time. I do try to get these things advertised as well in advance. And so if you check on the Sapiens website and click the notify me button when the live stream's made or set up, you can check there, inshallah. There's a lot of comments. Yeah, there's nothing here that's going to be too quick. So we'll leave it there for the time being. There's too many comments. It's going to take too long to go through them all. So we'll leave it there. May Allah bless you all. Like I say, this is Lighthouse Live. We're using this to advertise our service, the Lighthouse Project. You can get to that with this link, sapiensinstitute.org. It's completely free. If you want to ask these questions, you can do so in a private setting on a Zoom call with one of our mentors, completely free. It's available around the world, obviously, so long as you speak English. We also have it set up in the Spanish at the moment. We are looking at getting it set up in other languages as well, but primarily at the moment, just the English and the Spanish. And we can discuss these things. You get 1 hour of the time of one of the mentors. The condition is you have to have a sound mental health. That is, you can't be suffering from any severe mental conditions that have been diagnosed. And because we're not counselors, we are only mentors. Neither are we trained in psychology, so we can't deal with medical issues. And the other thing is you have to be over the age of 18. And it has to be specifically with regards to doubts, so things that you think undermine the fundamentals of the religion and cause you to believe or think that it's possible that Islam is not true. We could discuss these contentions with you, or if you're giving dawah, or if you're acting as in the capacity of a leader within the Muslim community to some degree, and you want to know, how to deal with the other categories, so how to deal with Muslims who are doubting Islam, how to deal with ex-Muslims, how to deal with non-Muslims interested in Islam. We can help you with all of these things. So please do feel free to book a meeting. You can also access many things. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got many things being produced by our brother Muhammad Hijab, who is currently producing the Londoniya course and all of these other things, the 99 Names of Allah. And so on and so on. There's lots of things being produced on the channel. There are also lots of things being produced on the learning platform, which are professionally filmed courses, which I shall share with you now. 1 second. Show you the website. So if you go to our website, sapiensinstitute.org, you can get access to our books for free, including my recent book, Nihilism and Islam, which you can get here. We've got books in Arabic as well. We've got the No Doubt course in a book. We've got Miracle of the Quran, The Incoherence of Atheism, Divine Perfection, the Burhan, Divine Reality, Scientific Deception of Atheists on Being Human. So lots of things coming out. We've got essays, so if you want to look at essays, we've got book reviews, things that go over certain books. If you want to listen to the audio books, we've got 2 at the moment. Hopefully, inshallah, we're going to have others produced as well. One being the Academic Conundrum by Dr. Uthman Latif, the other being my book on nihilism. So if you prefer listening rather than reading, these are free to access on Audible. They will also be released on Audible as well. You can go to our learning platform, and there's a number of courses on there. So if you've got doubts, we've got the No Doubt course. If you want to learn how to give dawah, we have the Advanced Dawah Training course. If you want to learn how to deal with Christians and their theology, we've got 2 courses by Brother Jake Brancatella, which are brilliant. One on the Testing the Trinity, another on Christological controversies. The Divine Reality course on atheism. We've got historical courses by Adnan Rashid. We've got a course, the No Doubt course in Spanish. There's a test for the Londoniya. So those of you who have been going through the Londoniya on the YouTube channel, you can do the test on the learning platform to see if you've actually been paying attention during the lessons. We've got a course on nihilism, which is what the book was based on. Dr. Uthman Latif on being human, going over the things like genocide and things that have occurred across the world and how dehumanization takes place. Brilliant book on being human, othering, dehumanization, and empathy. The Divine Perfection, it's an apologetic book dealing with the likes of William Lane Craig, a Christian who thinks that the Christians have a monopoly on the love of God, and that their conception of God's love is somehow superior to the Islamic conception. He deals with this objection really well, and completely refutes this notion and shows that actually Islam has a better conception of the love of God than they do. We've got courses on the art of disputation and debate based on a book, which was, I can't remember if it was written or just translated by Dr. Safik Chowdhury. He's a brilliant brother. And yeah, so we've got loads of courses. We've got more coming out soon as well. We've got a course coming out on the LGBTQ. We've got courses coming out on secularism, liberalism, etc. All of them are completely free. So you can see here, usually there's a price here. We have made these accessible to whoever wants to get access to them. So please do check them out and have a look and see what benefit you can get out of them, inshallah. And just engage with our content. Follow us on social media, subscribe to the channel, make use of the Lighthouse project, share the link with people you think might need it, and yeah, engage with us, share us, help us grow, and yeah, benefit from us as much as you possibly can. We're here for you. And yeah, we hope we can be of service to you all. May Allah bless you all. I hope you've had a great evening. I hope this has been of benefit to you. Apologies to whoever was listening and this conversation went completely over your head. Like I say, it's completely normal, so don't feel bad. If you found the topic confusing, there's a lot with regards to like the more philosophical conversations that requires a lot of research and time and patience that maybe you just can't be bothered putting in, and that's fine. There are other paths to accepting Islam as a true religion, so don't worry about it too much. But other than that, may Allah bless you all. Jazakallah khair for joining us today, and barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.